It's difficult times, but this Parsha is exactly what we need.
Why is that so?
So this week, new Sefer Bamidbar, and when you take a look at Parashat Bamidbar, it seems one of these super boring Parshas with lists over lists. First, the counting of Am Yisrael, a lot of numbers, then numbers and the way they parked, the way they were positioned with their tents in the desert, and then the jobs of the Nevi'im and lists of the Nevi'im, just lists over lists over lists, numbers over numbers. And first of all, you have to ask yourself, why does the Torah go into so much detail about these lists, about the structure of Am Yisrael in the desert? And second of all, more importantly, we know that you're not supposed to count Am Yisrael. We know there's a problem with counting Am Yisrael. We know it from David HaMelech and from other sources. But we look at this week's Parsha, and even Rashi starts off saying that the reason Am Yisrael is counted again to show the great affection HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for Am Yisrael. So are you supposed to count Am Yisrael? Are you not supposed to count Am Yisrael? What is going on over here in Parshat Bamidbar? What is all this detail with the numbers, the order, and the structure of Am Yisrael?
Yeah, that's interesting. We always see counting as a negative thing. You shouldn't count. And here we see Rashi saying counting is good. So is counting a good thing or a bad thing? So I think to first understand this, we need to understand the essence of counting. Why does Rashi say that it expresses love? He gives a great example of someone who has treasures that he loves and he keeps counting them again and again because he loves them so much. We understand that, but why? Why actually is that person counting those treasures again and again? And what does this mean about the concept of counting? If we think about it, you could say that the process of counting is the process of taking something which we have right now packed together as one, taking piece by piece, recognizing each piece on its own. And why is this something that the person with the bag of diamonds does? Because when he has a bag of diamonds, that's great. He has a bag of diamonds. But when he takes one and looks at it and appreciates it and then takes another, every single time he counts, he's going from a bag filled with diamonds to one diamond and another diamond and another diamond and another diamond. The process of counting is not only the end result when I have a number. The process of counting is the process itself. The process that Rashi says expresses love is that process where we go through each one and recognize it, recognizing its individual importance. We don't look at everything as one, we appreciate one and another and another and another. And this, says Rashi, is something that expresses the love HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves Am Yisrael, but he loves each and every one of us. And by counting, you're recognizing one after the other after the other. And often we need to count. We need to recognize the individual things. We came out of Mitzrayim, and one moment, suddenly Hashem takes us out, and we're outside of Mitzrayim, and we sit on Pesach night and we're told to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim. But one of the parts of the Haggadah is the Song of Dayenu. And just before the Song of Dayenu, we have an interesting piece where the different rabbis discuss the 10 makos. They weren't really 10, they were actually 50. No, they were actually 200, they were 250. And they're, breaking up each makkah into more and more pieces. And then we go on to Dayenu. And what do we do in Dayenu? Instead of saying, we appreciate the fact that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, before we say that, we break it into pieces. We take one piece and say, you know what? Forget everything else. Even just this is something to recognize, to appreciate. We're like looking at that bag full of diamonds, taking each diamond out, looking at it and saying, this is enough. This is already worthy of recognizing. That process leads us to the end of Dayenu, where we say, Kama ma'alot tovot. Look how many, the end of the counting, where we finally appreciate what we have. So the process of counting is something that takes us from a state of having something to the state of actually recognizing how much we have. And this is something that as humans, we often overlook the things that we have, and the process of counting is very, very important. And as Rashi says, expresses our love and gratitude. But on the other hand, we do see that counting Am Yisrael is a negative. We're not allowed to count. So what does that mean? I think this is coming from exactly that same point. If counting is taking each individual separately, then by counting, you're also separating each individual from the whole. Am Yisrael is what it is as a whole. Every individual has its own value, but it comes as part of coming from that whole. When you count, you're basically separating each individual, and each individual on their own, they may have value, but it doesn't have that protection and that value and that joint value and strength that we have as a whole as Am Yisrael. we lose that achdut, we lose that unity by taking each individual and counting them. This is especially expressed when actually coming together for a minyan, which is all about that edah, about being unified as one. We don't want to lose that unity. We want to recognize the value, but without disconnecting the individual value from the collective one, from that unifying value. And this is why the counting on the one hand expresses that recognition of the value, but on the other hand, when talking about Am Yisrael, we don't want to separate each individual. We can recognize that, but we want to recognize it as part of a whole, and therefore counting in that sense can represent something negative.
Exactly, and I think really this idea of taking Am Yisrael and dividing them up into individuals in order to count them, and on the other hand, when we look at Am Yisrael, we have to look at Am Yisrael as a klal, as a total in unity. This is exactly what Parshat Bamidbar is about, and as I started off saying, this is what we need, especially this week, because as we know from later on in Sefer Bamidbar, when Bilam the Rasha comes to curse Am Yisrael, he ends up blessing Am Yisrael. What does he say? This is exactly what he says. Look at Am Yisrael, how well structured they are. Look at the unity they have, how each individual knows his place within the greater nation, knows his part, knows exactly where he is. Look at that order Am Yisrael has, because we know there's fake unity when it's a group of people and they seem together, but however, each individual is for himself, for itself. There's chaos among them. Although from far they may look nicely put together, but when you look a little bit closer, there's no order, there's no structure. And on the other hand, you have unity where again, each individual knows exactly its place, knows exactly where to put his tent, knows exactly how to set himself up. And when you look from far, you see the glory, you see the beauty of Am Yisrael, just like Bilam Rasha says later on in Sefer Bamidbar. Unfortunately, sometimes we need our enemies to remind us of that, to remind us what unity is. However, the opposite side of it is that when we do have unity, that's what helps us against our enemy. As we know, the famous midrash from the time of Achav, that there were terrible Jews, they were worshiping idols, were doing avodah zarah, one of the worst avot as a nation Am Yisrael can do, yet they would win every single war they had. They were victorious because they had unity with them. There was no lashon hara. They did not talk bad about each other. They lived peacefully with each other. No matter what they had on their head or didn't have on their head or what they thought in their heart, they still lived peacefully with each other. They still got along. That's what got them out of their bad times, out of their wars with their enemies. And also besides the generation of Achav, we know the other midrash that says that peace among us is so great that even if all of Am Yisrael will be oved avodah zarah, no harm can be caused to our nation. Thinking about the difficult time we are in and who knows how long for, we have to remember that this is what's needed now. And Dafka Parashat Bamidbar goes into so much great detail about the structure, about the order, so that later on when Bilam Rasha talks about Am Yisrael, we'll understand what he means, what he's referring to, and we should use that to learn from it. We should learn from it for our generation, for today. And maybe the greater message from Parashat Bamidbar is that to have unity, you don't all have to be the same like we know from other sources, but you have to recognize that each individual has its place within the Klal Yisrael and live peacefully with it, live peacefully with them, live peacefully with each other. And even though sometimes some people actually make money out of divisiveness, we should ignore that. We shouldn't listen to it. We should remember that at the core, we're one nation. We have to be together. We have to stick together no matter what you wear on your head or you don't wear on your head, no matter what you believe in, what you don't believe in. This is what's going to help us at these hard times. This is what's going to make us victorious over our enemies.
Yeah, totally agree. And thinking of the other time we're at, Shavuot coming up soon, and we're in the middle of Sfirat HaOmer, of counting, I think understanding that concept of counting can help us understand the concept of Sfirat HaOmer and Shavuot. Because what happened on Shavuot? According to the Gemara, we were standing there ready on Vav B'Sivan, Shavuot, to receive the Torah. But it didn't happen then really. Only started the next day. We have the Aseret HaDibrot, then we have the Torah as we discussed previously. Only finally we receive it later in Yom Kippur. So what actually happened? What happened was that we were ready to receive Torah. And how did we become ready? We went through a process of recognizing the treasures that we have, of counting, of going step by step by step, of Hashem taking us out of Mitzrayim, us not necessarily understanding who we are and what we're capable of, but then going through that process of looking step by step, one by one, day by day, recognizing those treasures. When we come to the end and recognize that full process, that's when we're able and ready to stand and receive Torah. When we recognize and have gratitude for what we bring and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us, and when we recognize what each individual around us has, and we're able, as we know, the pasuk says, "Vayichan sham neged ahar." We were able to stand in unity as one, not because we're all the same, as you said, because we've counted and recognized the value of each and see it all together as one, makes us ready to be able to receive and accept the Torah.
Beautiful. And we'll send our tefillot, our prayers from here for the success of our soldiers, refuah shlema to all the injured, and for all of Am Yisrael, may we defeat our enemy and bring back the peace and quiet to our land.
Amen, and we should have a peaceful Shabbat and a Chag Shavuot Sameach.
Shkoyach, good Shabbos, Chag Shavuot Sameach, and Besorot Tovot, Yeshuot v'Nechamot to all of Am Yisrael.
For more Talking Torah videos on different topics, check out our YouTube channel.